Welcome back, my fellow assassins, to another episode of the Dark Assassins podcast, the show that dives deep into not just technology, but the concepts, software, and procedures behind it all, and explains it so simply that even your grandma can understand it. As always, I'm your host, the Dark Assassin. So it has been a really rough past couple of weeks for our good friend the Zuck. I mean, multiple lawsuit verdicts going against him, as well as yet another user data privacy scandal, potentially the worst one that Facebook/Meta has ever had. And these lawsuits collectively have cost the Zuck hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, think about all of the employees that he's now going to have to lay off in order to compensate for his losses because you entitled lowlifes actually value your mental and emotional well-being as well as your privacy and aren't fully okay with some tech giant causing you mental and emotional distress and harvesting all of your data while they're at it. So jokes aside, all of these things that have gone down in the lawsuits and the data privacy scandal, none of this we should actually be surprised by. I think basically everyone listening to this has probably been well aware of the situations that have been going on and have kind of it's kind of been an unkept secret that has now finally gotten some verdicts to it. But with all this turmoil going on in the Zuck's world, we should, I think, take a moment of silence to demonstrate our sympathies and resolve to stand with the Zuck in these trying times. Okay, moment over. But the funny thing about this is I came up for this week's trivia question. I wanted to kind of think of something that was kind of on brand with what we were going to talk about, and that's where we get into this week's trivia question. So the first lawsuit Meta, aka Facebook, was involved in was when ConnectU filed a lawsuit against then Facebook, alleging that Zuckerberg had broken an oral contract to build the social networking site, copied the idea, and used source code that they provided to Zuckerberg to create the competing site Facebook. Now, what year was that lawsuit filed? So the reason I say this was funny and I kind of got a chuckle out of it when I was looking and researching this, there is an entire Wikipedia article documenting every single law throughout the decades, and mind you, there are many against Facebook, which I find absolutely hilarious. But with that, let's get into this week's cybersecurity tip. So this week's cybersecurity tip is one of those things that seems like it should be obvious, but apparently some people need a reminder, and that is to not expose your KVM, or keyboard, video, and mouse, or lights out management ports to the internet. Now, like I said, I know this seems like it should probably be common sense, but here we are. See, remember, back in the day when firewalls didn't exist, you could basically plugged your computer basically directly into the internet. And when firewalls didn't exist, if your computer had some sort of vulnerability on it, anyone in the world could just hack you right then and there and take over your computer. But nowadays, with firewalls and such, this generally is, it's not completely solved, obviously, but it's a lot less likely that some random person is going to, attack your computer, like come in through your direct connection to the internet and hack you. I mean, it's still technically possible, but it's not like it was, back in like the Windows XP days, for instance. But if you expose your KVM to the public, i.e. you break a hole in your firewall to allow traffic to your KVM from outside your network, you're basically just asking to get pwned. And in this case, there are instances where these like IP KVMs that were kind of all the rage. I mean, I think they still kind of are, like, the Jet KVM and that kind of a thing, all the things that everyone was kind of like pushing for like the past couple years. Turns out they have some serious vulnerabilities that can basically give threat actors instant access to your computer, because if you're not familiar, a KVM, or a keyboard, video, and mouse, is basically a thing that plugs into your computer and allows you to get a basically a interface like you were sitting by the computer. So imagine you were sitting at your desktop computer with your keyboard, mouse, and you have your monitor right there and you're doing whatever work you want to do. A KVM basically gives you that functionality, but anywhere you can connect to it over the internet or an IP address. So this is really helpful for computers in data centers, because you obviously aren't necessarily going to have direct access to the system unless you're inside the data center itself and can go specifically to that server in the rack and plug directly into it. So what most servers come with is a form of lights out management. So this is Dell's iDRAC or HP's ILO. Also, it can be considered a baseboard management controller or baseboard management control system. There's a couple different kinds of names for it, but they basically all do the same thing. And what they do is they give you a way that through usually like a web interface, that you can go to an IP address and then you can get full access to whatever is on the server, just like you were sitting directly in front of it with a keyboard plugged in, a mouse plugged in, and a monitor hooked up. So the reason why these are so bad if they get compromised is now this person has bare metal access to the computer. Because the other thing that KVMs and these lights out management systems do is they give you BIOS level access to the system. In other words, just like you could turn your computer on if you were sitting right in front of it and hit whatever the special key is to get into the BIOS, you can do the exact same thing with a KVM or lights out management system. So a threat actor can do whatever the heck they want. And they basically get carte blanche here because, like I said, they can do whatever they want. So if you're running a hypervisor, for instance, they can have direct access to the hypervisor. If you're running just a regular VM or other server that's connected to it, they can do whatever they want there. The one, I guess, caveat to the hypervisor, them getting full access, is depending on how your virtual machines are configured, they can't necessarily log into all of them unless your hypervisor has shared keys or something with all of the VMs and there's no password on them, so they can just get into them, which would be a very, very bad idea. Um, but the other thing is, because they get BIOS level access, the other thing that a lot of these KVMs and lights out management systems allow you to do is mount media to them, i.e., ISO files, like CD files that you can install an operating system on. So what they could do is they could get into these vulnerable KVMs, upload some kind of ISO, whatever operating system they want to install it onto your server, and do whatever they want with it from there. And that is why this is such a serious vulnerability, and why you should definitely not, under any circumstances, be exposing your KVMs or your lights out management systems to the public internet. If you really want to practice good cybersecurity principles, all of those management interfaces should be on their own VLAN that don't have access to anything and you really don't even have access to. So a threat actor, if they do infiltrate your network, can't get to those systems, because if they get to those systems, they can compromise the entire system, not just a single virtual machine or container, for instance. So yeah, it's really bad news when big vulnerabilities like this come out, because you can basically get completely destroyed. So here is a hypothetical scenario. So these IP KVMs typically get plugged into systems that don't have native lights out management interfaces. So a lot of people will tend to plug these into either home built like servers that they created. Maybe they built a custom chassis and they didn't have a dedicated board with a lights out management thing. They'll plug in one of these IPKVMs, or they'll just plug it into like an old desktop computer or something they're using as a server. So in cases like these, I mean, you can also, I guess, do the same thing for an actual dedicated rack mount server with like a lights out management system. But for the sake of argument, these IP KVMs were the ones that had the vulnerabilities, so we're just going to kind of stick to them right now. So let's assume that you are very bad with your cybersecurity practices and you have auto login enabled. Now, that might be a little bit of a stretch, so let's walk this back a little bit. Let's just say you do have a password enabled, but you had already logged into the system once, and because it's a server, it doesn't have like an automatic, it just kind of stays on the desktop because it's a server and you don't want it to go to sleep, and you forgot to log out the last time you disconnected from the IPKVM, so your user is still technically logged into the system. If a threat actor managed to exploit the vulnerability in these IPKVMs and get into your desktop, now they have the ability to do basically whatever they want. Now, if I were a threat actor and I got this kind of access, one of the first things that I would check is command line history, browser history, if applicable, SSH keys, SSH configs installed, applications installed, and basically start to build a picture of what this device is used for and has access to, because that is where you can kind of build where you want to go to next. Because, for instance, let's say this IPKVM is set up as a dedicated, if it's a dedicated server, that's one thing, or if it's a jump box, that's something completely different. Because if it's a jump box, that it most likely has access to basically everything on the network, because that's typically what jump boxes are used for. It's basically a single computer that you can log into, which has access to, which gives you access to everything else that you need to get access to, hence the jump box, because you get to there and then you can jump to wherever you need to. And if you have an IPKVM hooked up to one of these bad boys, and you have SSH keys shared across all of your servers and there's no password on them, all the threat actor has to do is just SSH into any of those servers and they get into them without any authentication required on their part, because you already have these shared SSH keys. If it was a dedicated server, then you have a little more things you can play with. You'd have to figure out what this server is actually running. If it's a DNS server, can you do some kind of like ARP poisoning or something to, get them to go to some malicious domain that you control? I mean, there's a lot of different things that you could do. If it's actually a server with a desktop interface, another fantastic thing that I would look for if I were a threat actor is browser history. Do they have any browser tabs open? Because the thing with browsers is there's a decent chance that they might already be logged into things like their social media accounts, their bank account, other very personal accounts that you definitely don't want people to have access for. And for instance, if they did have a browser open and say they were already logged into like their bank or some other confidential site, if they're already logged in, no need for a username, password, or MFA mechanism. They're already logged in, so you can do whatever the heck you want there. Now, if it's a bank, if depending on what you are trying to do maliciously, that they might be like, give us like, we're going to send you a text for like a two-factor code or something. So it's not necessarily 100% foolproof, but you kind of get the point here, because things are usually cached, whether that's like session tokens or things like this. So even if the websites aren't actually open, if you launch the browser and go to various websites, you might already be logged in without having to actually do anything. Things like email accounts, bank accounts, social medias, things like this. Another terrible one was if they have some remote access program like Guacamole, or if it's like a Windows computer and they have various like remote desktop sessions that you can log into. I mean, that's also kind of game over, because then they can just jump to wherever else they want to jump to from there and can kind of do whatever they want. And then, like I said, because these IPKVMs allow you to mount bootable media, they can install whatever operating system they want and just completely take control of the system. Because if they can't take it over and do what they want by just having the desktop interface. No big deal. I'll just install my own operating system and then I can install whatever I want, set up my botnet, set up my crypto miner, whatever I'm trying to do, and I can have free reign of the system. So yeah, if you have one of these IP KVMs, I don't know why you would give it access to anything on the internet. It should be like fully locked down and only accessible from your internal network. So yeah, and preferably completely isolated as well. But yeah, if you have one of these, definitely check to see if there are any updates, and definitely don't be having it publicly exposed to the internet. And that is your cybersecurity tip for the week. Now let's get into what nerdy stuff have I been up to this week. So stop me if you've heard this one before, but I got an alert from my notification system that my home lab slash internet was down. And then about 10 minutes later or so, I got a notification from my ISP that yes, the internet was in fact down in my area. Um, so this has, I don't remember how many times I've reported on this on the podcast, but it's at least the third, if not fourth time that this has happened. And at this point, I think I should just sell my notification service back to my ISP so they would have a more accurate time frame of when their service goes down. Because so far, every time the service has gone down, my notification system has either beaten theirs or been on par with theirs. So I think there was one instance where my notification thing triggered like either the same time theirs did or maybe like a minute afterwards. But the majority of the times that the service has gone down, my notification system notified me before my ISP did. So perhaps I should, strike up a deal or some kind of contract with them to either get reduced rates on my internet or they can just pay me directly for my services because apparently this has been proven for now the third, if not fourth time, that my system is better than theirs. um, Actual nerdy things I did this week, though, I did get some more pages added to my home lab wiki. This was something that I started years ago as a means of I really didn't like solving a problem and then encountering the same problem months later, completely forgetting how to solve it and having to go down the same rabbit holes trying to find that one article that solved my problem, and just wasting time I didn't need to waste. So I decided to create a home lab wiki where I can write all kinds of guides and how-tos for common things that I run into as a way to, if I encounter this thing again, I can just go to my home lab wiki, find the appropriate article, and follow the steps and be back up and running in no time or do whatever I need to do. And this week I happened to boot up my Arch Dev laptop for the first time in I don't know how long, and I was trying to run updates on it. And if you've ever used Arch and haven't run updates on it in a while, that's usually bad news bears because things generally tend not to work. Because Arch moves so quickly, things get changed and modified, and there's dependency things, and it's kind of a whole can of worms. Thankfully, I had speaking of browsers and browser sessions, I had a Firefox session that I was able to reload that had all of the answers for tabs pulled up already for these common issues that I was running into. So I got saved in that regard, but as we kind of discussed in the IP KVM thing, that also could be your downfall as well. So what I decided to do is take this opportunity to convert those findings to wiki pages so I can I uploaded them to my home web wiki. I did write them myself just on the off see, because one thing I wanted to do with the home lab wiki is not just link directly to articles that solve my problem, because what happens if that website goes down or that URL changes or something like that and the link breaks? Then I'm kind of out of luck in that case. So what I like to do is I like to basically take the contents of the article and the steps that they follow, kind of reword them in my own words, put the commands in there, and then link to the article just so I have, that reference there. But in the event that that article is no longer available, I still have all the steps I need to do what I need to, and I'm not just straight out of luck. Um, so that was definitely a huge win. And yeah, I have to say the home lab wiki has probably been one of my best creations in the home lab, just because how much time it has managed to save me for very repetitive tasks that I have to do. I don't have to worry about arrowing up 1,000 times in history on command lines, or scouring the internet or browser history for long lost articles that I found months ago. It's definitely been fantastic. So if you don't have a home lab wiki for your home lab, or even at your job, if you don't have like some kind of documentation for repetitive tasks like that, I cannot highly recommend it enough, because it saves you so much time. Because even if you don't, necessarily write dedicated scripts or automations for these things, just having the steps documented will save you a ton of time. Now, obviously, if you can get some kind of automation set up, that would be better, because then you don't really have to think about it. And if you're using a tool like Ansible, for instance, or just Python or Bash scripts, those scripts in a way kind of document themselves, what they're doing and how they're doing it. Ansible more so than like a Python script. But in either case, having that documented way of getting results every single time and just being able to follow steps so you don't really have to think about it much or search for hours and hours, is a huge time saver. So even if it's not automated, you're still going to save yourself a significant amount of time just following the steps you have laid out in your home lab wiki. So yeah, that was what I got up to. But now we have to turn our attention to the Zuck. So the social media in general, because this first lawsuit actually applied to more than just Facebook, but social media got think of the childrenified. And what I mean by that is they basically were found in I don't know if negligence the right word, but a court of law found that social media companies like Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube were found to not only be endangering children, but also to be addicting as well. Now, if you listen to this podcast at all, that probably shouldn't come as a shock to you, that social media companies engage in this sort of behavior. But in my opinion, the worst part about this first lawsuit is that Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube only had to pay $6 million in damages, which is a slap in the wrist is a slap on the wrist at best, especially with how many billions of dollars they make every year. Like 6 million to them, that's what, maybe like a couple hours of uptime. Like that's nothing to them. They don't care about that. But in a separate case, the good old Zucky Poo had to pay $375 million in penalties for endangering children. So this was a separate case than the one that I just mentioned, where they had to pay $6 million. But what I find kind of funny and ironic is how social media platforms in general are the antithesis of privacy. Yet they're the ones being found endangering children, and not the tools and methodologies that privacy advocates promote, that do get hounded as, this whole endangering children, think of the children arguments, like encryption, for instance. Like, how many times in the past few years have various politicians and other governmental organizations called for either getting rid of encryption entirely or putting back doors in it because, quote unquote, think of the children? Because I guess if they can't spy, excuse me, monitor everything that you do, how can they ensure that the children are safe? Think of the children. Yet somehow it's not, encryption protocols or security advocate companies that are getting, found of endangering children. But no, it's the social media companies that are basically the exact opposite, where everything's out there for the public to see. Nothing is hidden, everything's just right there, and data is harvested left and right. So, call me, I am just absolutely shocked, that a platform like that would be one that would be found endangering children, which, I mean, I just find it kind of ironic in that sense. But in recent months, countries like Australia has already implemented social media bans for kids under a certain age. I think it's 15 or 16. And other countries like France, Norway, and Spain and others are looking to pass or implement similar bans as well in their own countries. Now, this is separate from the age verification laws that some countries have passed, which basically require you to verify you the age you say you are. Because if you were old enough to remember back in the good old days, like when Facebook first launched, for instance, you could set your age to be whatever the heck you wanted, and there was no verification for that whatsoever. But now some countries are passing laws where you actually have to verify your age on those platforms for reasons. But some countries, I guess, are deciding to take it a step further and just outright ban social media for kids under a certain age. Now, some of you might think that I would be in favor of something like this because of how much I dislike social media, but I actually don't agree with this for a couple reasons. One, yes, social media is horrible in general, not just for young people. I mean, it's full of ads, it's garbage, it has garbage brain rot content, false, unvetted information, not to mention the fact that courts have actually found now that is not only designed to be addictive, but also endangers children. And as the state of New Mexico put it in their court case they just won, it is, quote, a breeding ground for child predators. So, as much as Meta and the Zuck would like to tell you otherwise, the court ruled in favor of New Mexico, where the Attorney General of the state had this to say, quote, Meta executives knew their products harmed children, disregarded warnings from their own employees, and lied to the public about what they knew. The jury's verdict is a historic victory for every child and family who has paid the price for Meta's choice to put profits over kids' safety. So, yeah, I mean, I think most people kind of knew this already. I think it was one of those unkept secrets that social media was intended to be addictive. That was kind of the entire point of it, which it makes sense, right? Because the service is free. And when the service is free, you are the product. And the only way a company can make more money off of you is to keep gathering information on you and gather as much information as possible. And the best way to do that is to keep you on the platform for as long as possible. And what better way to keep people on your platform for as long as possible than make your platform addictive so they keep coming back to it and stay on it even longer. Now, tangent aside, um, I don't think one of the other reasons why I'm kind of against governments straight up banning social media for kids is, let's just be real here, it's not going to work. Now, it will work in the sense that those who don't care enough probably won't bother to try to access it, but those who actually do care and have the means to are easily going to bypass these restrictions. It's similar to things like content filters in various countries. All you have to do is use something like a VPN, use Tor, use proxies, things like this to spoof your IP address, and look at that. The restrictions are now gone. So, um, also, the idea of a government telling you what you can and cannot do is kind of like the 1984 dystopian future. And it was a dystopian future for a reason in that book. But the other thing of it too is, like, the kids these days, like, they're already using VPNs for things like to get around other access restrictions. Like, I remember back when I was in high school, kids using VPNs to get around blocked things on the school's Wi-Fi. So if kids were doing that, well over a decade ago, you can be sure they're doing that now, to get past things. Like, like think of it when TikTok was threatening to be banned, and everyone like kind of had a meltdown when TikTok was offline in the US for like, what was it, like less than a day, something like that. All you had to do was VPN into a different country, and wow, TikTok works again. So it's basically going to be the same thing for these social media sites. All you have to do is VPN into a country that doesn't have these uh, restrictions and bans on the platform, and they're going to be more than happy to let you in. Now, I guess theoretically, if they were really going to be good about this, when they could verify your country of origin and your age, and then ban you outright based on that, even if you were trying to access from a different country. But something tells me that that's not going to be how this is implemented. It's just going to be an IP based restriction, and they're going to call it good there. Um, because I think if you tell people that aren't tech savvy that, hey, if you try to connect to this site, um, in this country, because this country has this collection of IP addresses, if you try to connect from any one of those IP addresses, you're not going to be able to get in. So we banned it in your country. You're welcome. And people are probably like, okay, sounds good. Even though that's really not how this works. Now, technologically, it is 100% possible for Meta and all of their various arms like Facebook and Instagram to be able to ensure that someone from a certain country that is under a certain age doesn't get access to their platform. But why would they do that? I highly doubt that is going to actually happen. If they do, I will have to give them an actual due congratulations. But yeah, I kind of doubt that's going to happen. But yeah, so the other thing is, I think everybody remembers when they were a kid, and especially with teenagers, if you tell them not to do something, that's basically the green light to go do that thing. So the I think the better way is to make the teenagers, if you really don't want them using social media, the better course of action would probably get them to think that it's uncool, because the one of the best motivators for a teenager to not do something is if it is deemed as uncool by the peers, by the collective teenagers. If they don't think something is cool, they're not going to want to have anything to do with it. See, there was a shift at one point in Facebook's history where a lot of young people stopped using the platform and kind of, I mean, they still had accounts, but they switched the majority of their traffic to other social media sites like Snapchat and Instagram, because all of their parents were getting onto Facebook and it wasn't cool to be on the same platform as your parents. So we got to go to a different one. So if you, if you find a way to disincentivize them from wanting to use these these apps, I think that would probably give you better results than just outright banning something at the government level. But again, this is going to vary greatly from person to person because everybody's different, obviously. Someone like me that's very privacy focused, educating them on, how terrible these sites are for like privacy and how privacy invasive they are, would probably be a good path to take, and might actually convince some people that are privacy focused to stop using these platforms, or at least limit their usage of them, limit how much they interact with posts, how much they share voluntarily, things like this, limit their screen time, that kind of a thing. And for individuals that say struggle with self-confidence issues, which I think was kind of the point of one of the lawsuits there, um, just kind of maybe helping these kids understand, or just adults in general understand, how fake of a perception everything on social media is. Because if you, in case you've been living under a rock or you didn't know, basically everything you see on social media is fake, in the sense that it's not an accurate depiction of reality. So all of those quote unquote influencers that you see that depict their lives as like this perfect beautiful thing, are basically entirely fake, because anyone that's ever lived on the earth knows that your life is full of ups and downs. It's not perfect all of the time, but what you can do with social media is you can make it seem perfect all the time because you only document the good stuff and don't document the bad stuff. So if you only document the good stuff, you can make it seem like your life is so much better than everyone else because you apparently, according to your social media, you don't have no issues ever come upon you. You never have to deal with any struggles in life. None of this happens. But I think the issue is not everyone understands that. People think what they see there is actually reality when in all honesty it's not. So it's kind of like social media. I think a good comparison for what you see on social media is it's curated to the point of perfection. So think of it like a video game trailer or a book cover. It can give you an inclination into, that person's life, but it's not even close to telling the full story. How many instances have you seen a video game trailer or even a movie trailer for that matter that looks fantastic, it looks amazing, and then you actually play that game or you watch that movie and it ends up being a total dud. It's a stinker and you kind of regret, buying the game or buying the movie ticket. Same thing with books too. They like to say don't judge a book by its cover, but let's be honest, I think if you're like me, that's one of the things you absolutely do. You judge a book by its cover, and maybe it has a super epic cover, but the characters are bland, there's no hero's journey, and the book is just a straight up bummer. Um, this is basically what social media is like. You're basically just getting the trailer or the book cover, and you're not actually getting the full story. Once you actually understand the full story and see the full picture, the facade basically falls apart. So that I think if you that's one thing you'd have to kind of demonstrate to people, but also it's not just kids and adults too. Because I've been kind of rambling a lot here, but I think to summarize, everyone is different, and if you really want to stop both kids and adults alike from being addicted to social media, banning it is not going to work, and it's not the way to go. You have to convince them and show them how alternatives are better than social media, and social media just isn't worth their time. Now, I've led enough people in my life to know that the best way to get a group of people to do something is to get their buy-in on it. So if you just tell someone to do something, they might do it, but they'll probably do it like, especially if it's in a workplace setting, they might do it, but they'll probably do it begrudgingly and probably not put as much effort into it as they would if they actually wanted to do it themselves. But if you can get their buy-in on the common goal and get them to feel like this is their decision to do this thing, they're going to put a lot more effort and you're going to get a much better product as a result. So if you can convince people that getting off of social media or using it less is their decision and not you telling them, you're going to get much better results than if you said you're not allowed to use this anymore. But that's just my 2 cents. I'll have links to both of the various lawsuits down in the show notes if you're interested in reading them more. But the hits just keep on coming for the Zuck, because in one of the least shocking turn of events ever, it has been found that Meta is recording data from users' Meta AI Ray-Ban glasses and sending it off to third parties. Shocker of the century, I know. But in case you needed any additional reasons not to buy the Meta AI Ray-Bans glasses, here is one more for you. But I think what we need to do is take a step back for a second and ask ourselves, is anyone surprised by this? Is anyone surprised that Meta launched a pair of glasses with a camera and microphone attached to it, and is surprised that Meta didn't harvest all of that data coming into it and sending it off to third parties? Is anyone really surprised by this? Because if you are, I'm not entirely sure what to tell you, because this is basically right down in line. This is like right in Meta's playbook. This is something that shouldn't be a shock to anyone, and I mean, there are many reasons why I didn't get these glasses, but I mean, when I saw Meta coming out with these, I think I knew, and I think most people knew, that this is exactly what their MO was. Their entire plan was to harvest as much data from these AI glasses as possible, and it has now been allegedly found out by this Swedish article that I will have linked in the show notes. But think about it in this case, right? You buy the glasses, but you don't have to pay for any sort of subscription to use the AI functionality. You just buy the glasses and then everything else is free, aka you are the product. And the article I have linked below is alleging that Meta has been collecting user data through its AI glasses and has been sharing it with some company called Sama, which is a data processing company with operations in Kenya. So not only is the Zuck harvesting everything you see and everything you hear through the glasses, but he's also sending it off to Kenya. Now, the reason he's doing this is to basically train AI. That's the whole mission objective of these glasses, is to gather as much real-world data as possible, send it off to cheap labor over in Kenya, and get them to identify the various things that the glasses are seeing in order to train artificial intelligence. Way to go. I mean, this isn't something, like I said, this shouldn't come as a shock to us, but as we'll kind of see, it gets a lot more disgusting the more we dig into this. So, according to the report from the Swedish newspaper, the devices may capture not only images but conversations, but also highly personal moments ranging from clothing changes to private activities whenever the glasses are worn. So, according to this Swedish article, these workers in Kenya essentially dread going to work because the images they know that they're going to see, which include things like bathroom activities, intimate acts, banking details, you name it. Anything that these glasses see, anything you see when you have them on, it's essentially recording all the time and sending that data back to Meta, which then sends it off to this company in Kenya, even though the light isn't on the glasses showing you that it's actually recording or looking at anything. But the fact that these glasses are recording all that stuff is absolutely disgusting, disgraceful, and despicable, and Meta should be ashamed of themselves. I know they're not, and I doubt that they are, because why would they care? It's just the cost of doing business. It's making them more money. It's making their AI allegedly better, so, I mean, who cares? But in what universe would any sane person think that we should record and transmit everything and not only think it's okay, but be able to sleep at night knowing how much of people's lives you are actively violating? Like, the fact that Meta greenlit the fact that these glasses can record everything they see, including essential, very intimate acts, I mean, the article goes into more detail than what I'm going to go into here. So if you want to see it, you're more than welcome to. But very adult acts being performed and recorded by these glasses, and that data is being sent off to third parties. So pretty disgusting, and I don't know how the product managers that greenlit these glasses are able to sleep at night with knowing full well that these exact kind of behaviors and this kind of material were going to be recorded by these and sent off to third parties. Now, if we're being realistic here, as a user, you should realistically expect that anything you ask these glasses, it would record and send back to Meta. So if looked at a tree and asked the glasses, what kind of tree is this? Or you looked at a dog and asked, what kind of dog is this? You can realistically expect that those interactions would be recorded and sent back to Meta so they could do whatever they want to do. But the fact that you can just be existing and the glasses recording everything while you're just existing, I don't think users should have the expectation that that's going to be happening. Because if that was the case, you really can't even wear these glasses in general. I mean, you shouldn't be wearing them or have them in general. Um, But the fact that yeah, so like if like I could understand and it would be completely understandable if like instances of, it was only instances where the user asked questions, right? Now, you'd still probably end up with situations that like this that the article describes where you could still get, things like intimate acts, banking details, that kind of a thing, but I think you would get a lot less of them. But I think this is the other thing that you kind of have to reason why you have to take that as an expectation is because the chips in these glasses, they're not powerful enough to do any kind of on device um, processing, right? And I think it's kind of an unkept secret at this point that any and all dedicated AI devices like the Rabbit, the Humane AI Pin, these Meta AI glasses, any AI wearables are just surveillance devices to gather as much data as possible in order to send back to the creator so they can continue to train their various AI models. Plus, they can gather as much user data as possible, and who doesn't love that juicy user data? Because none of these dedicated AI devices are powerful enough to do any sort of on-device intelligence. Now, I'm going to sound like an Apple shill here, but Apple is arguably the best at this in the sense that they have independently verified through third parties that their Apple Intelligence Cloud thing that they send queries to when your iPhone can't perform the Apple Intelligence query on device, it has been proven that none of that data can be tied to you, and there is no way for Apple to figure out who asked. It's all isolated, and nothing can be traced back to you. Apple doesn't collect the data or have any way to understand or know what came from who, so there's no way that they can collect data on you. Now, personally, until these AI wearable devices can do everything on device, I will want nothing to do with them. Um, so until third parties can independently verify that all AI wearables do all of their processing on device and nothing gets sent to the cloud or shared with a third party or harvested, I want no part of them. And even when they are vetted by third parties, I'll probably still have my skeptic glasses on and probably won't get them anyway. Um, but yeah, until there is independent third party verification that any kind of AI wearable isn't just a proxy for harvesting as much user data as possible, I think collectively we should just say no to it because as this article points out, they are recording things that you definitely do not want to have recorded. Um, Now, Meta claims that the recorded information is primarily used to train artificial intelligence systems and to improve product performance. Like, that's supposed to make the situation any better. Um, like, Meta is basically ignoring all the disgusting things that these glasses record and just saying, well, it's to make our models better. Okay, Meta. Anyway, in layman's terms, so if all of this didn't really make sense, the TLDR in human understandable terms without the tech jargon, Meta is sending what you see and what you hear with your glasses to Kenya so people can slog through everything and categorize it, and categorize things like, oh, that is a stop sign, that is a bush, that is a car, that is a train, etc., in order to train their AI to recognize those things. Why are they sending it to Kenya? That is a fantastic question. The thing that I, I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's also not funny at the same time. Like, it's disgusting and despicable that Meta is doing this, but at the same time, it's kind of hilarious because we all know that this is something that Meta would do. This is exactly up their alley of something that they would do and have done before, where they're just more than happy to send and harvest data without people knowing and sending it off to third parties. So it's kind of wild. So If you don't have Meta AI glasses, this is probably yet another reason to not get them. And if you do have Meta AI glasses, this is probably your cue to get rid of them. Um, so yeah, so some very, very hot water that the Zuck has found himself in the past couple weeks. Um, and speaking of hot water that the Zuck has found himself in, that brings us back to our trivia question for the week, which is the first lawsuit that Meta, aka Facebook, was involved in was when ConnectU filed a lawsuit against then Facebook, alleging that Zuckerberg had broken an oral contract to build the social networking site, copied the idea, and used source code that they provided to Zuckerberg to create the competing Facebook site. What year was that lawsuit? If you said 2004, congratulations, you got this week's trivia question correct. And the thing that I find hilarious about this is Facebook started in 2004. So within less than a year, within a matter of months, Facebook was already getting sued, which I think is kind of a very poetic kind of a foreshadowing, if you will, of what their future would hold, where they would find themselves in significant legal troubles all the way through their existence. So it's very poetic in that sense. So if you enjoyed this episode, definitely be sure to leave it a rating and review and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And also be sure to share with a friend and family member. And if you have any questions about this episode, or if you have any comments, topics, or ideas for future episodes, if you're on YouTube, you can leave a comment down below, or you can always shoot me an email at contact@darkassassinsinc.com. There's also a link for that down in the show notes below as well. And that's going to do it for me in this episode of the Dark Assassins podcast. Until next time, my fellow assassins, remember, bull nothing equals true. If action not equal to null, return true. I'll see you next time on the Dark Assassins podcast.